Nice.
Solo honor mode is supposed to be one of the ultimate challenges when it comes to challenge ones in Baldur's Gate. However, after 2000 hours, these ones start to feel like casual playthroughs more than anything else. So I decided to up the stakes a bit and try to beat the game and all its major bosses as a solo character without ever taking a single hit. Now, before we start, let's quickly clarify the rules for this one. First of all major fights have to be forked in manual combat to avoid any cheesy stealth archer tricks and whatnot. After all, we want an actual challenge, right? Next, let me clarify that no hit doesn't mean no damage. This means I am allowed to take self-inflicted or environmental damage. For those who want to know exactly what counts as a hit and what doesn't, I will put the specifics in the description or in a pinned comment. Alright, one more thing before we start. I'm going to over-explain a lot in this one, so you have been warned. For the background of our starting character, we of course are going to choose Dark Urge, as this background will give us different kind of benefits throughout the run. I will address each one of them once we acquire them. For the race I picked Human for the shield proficiency, since I wanted to use a shield in a certain hellish encounter down the road. So to be honest, more than anything else, it was for the meme to play as Firekeeper. If you wanted to truly min-max this, you would want to play as some kind of elf for the Thay Ancestry passive feature, or Lightfoot Halfling for their passive features. Gale can also be good for the Shadow Spell slot and the Anointed and Splendor condition. But truth be told, it doesn't really matter what you play. The advantages you gain are so minimalistic, it barely makes a difference. Now, since I want to do this run without any respecking, I decided to play as a wizard. This is because the wizard is the most flexible class in the game, as you are able to learn every single spell, which in turn allows you to have an answer to everything your enemies might throw at you. For our cantrips we take Mage Hand and Minor Illusion for the utility, and then Firebolt, as this is the best damage dealing cantrip. For our spells we are going to take the 3 utility spells Featherfall, Enhanced Sleep and Long Strider. Then we take Mage Armor and Shield to make it a lot harder for our enemies to hit us. And last but not least, we take Magic Missile for our early and mid game main damage spell. I don't think this choice needs any explanation. Now for our ability points, we start out with 17 intelligence, which will allow us to get up to 22 intelligence at the end of this one, through the Hag Hair and the Mirror of Loss. Next we set our dexterity to 16, which is very important as your dexterity also determines how high your base initiative is. And for almost all of our fights it's very important that we get the first move to avoid getting hit immediately. For the rest of our points we put our wisdom up to 14, since there are a lot of wisdom checks throughout the game, and this will help us a lot to successfully get past these checks. And last but not least we set our charisma to 10, simply so that we won't have any penalties for our charisma checks. Usually you would want to get at least 14 constitution for all of your builds, so that your concentration doesn't break that easily. However, since we are not allowed to get hit anyway, there's no reason for us to put any points into constitution. As for our skill proficiencies, you can put them wherever you want. The only one that matters is Arcana for the third act, so that we have an easier time getting the Robe of the Weave and the legendary stuff inside Ramaz's tower. After we wake up inside the Nautiloid, our first objective is to free us. When you are trying to free us, I recommend to go for the investigation check first. Which I guess is obvious, since we are an intelligence-based character. But even if your character doesn't have any intelligence, you still should always go for the investigation check first, because even if you fail, you still can try the other options after that. Anyway, the reason why we want to free us is because we do need him to safely no-hit the Helm fight, and we also need him later in the second act against Myrkul. Now, for the Helm fight we both pre-buff us and ourselves with Enhanced Sleep and Featherfall to increase our movability. It might not look like it, but the turn order we got here is actually pretty bad for us. Because to ensure that we don't get hit, in the first turn we need to kill both imps. And to have the highest chance of actually pulling this off, you want us to move before you, or at the same time with you. This way we can attack the imp left to us with us before we attack him with our own character. The reason why we want to do this is because Us technically has a chance to one-hit Deer if he gets a max damage roll or a crit. This would be perfect for us because then we could use all 3 magic missiles to hit the other imp for the guaranteed kill. Of course, we still can kill him with only 2, and most of the time we also will, but it's simply not a guaranteed kill. And while it seems completely absurd to look at this, and it would be in your normal one, this is the kind of stuff you have to pay attention to if you want to do such a run. Alright, now that you all think I'm completely insane, let's keep going. Since I couldn't take a turn with Us yet, I had no choice but to split my magic missiles and hope I get the damage rolls to kill the imp on the right side. Which I did. Now we are going to jump over the remaining imp and move to the far left corner next to Commander Zalk.
On my way.
Which is only possible because we pre-warped ourselves with Enhanced Leap and Featherfall. Once Zalk did his turn, we kill the remaining imp with Us and jump down right next to our own character. At this spot we are now both far enough that the health spore won't be able to reach us. On our next turn we then take the high ground and kill the health spore. Not using magic missile here was actually pretty stupid, since Us only has an 80% hit chance against the health spore. So definitely a very unnecessary risk I took there, but I didn't get punished for it. So we're just gonna keep pretending this was the best possible move, like a true pro player. On our last turn we just take advantage of the high ground we took before and do a big jump that almost gets us right to the transponder. All that's left to do now is to dash forward. At the beach we immediately go to our camp to get the shapeshifter mask and some potions from our traveler's chest. For those who don't know where these items come from, they were a part of a gift from Larian for everyone who played the beta, and also the early access later I believe. Either way, since the full release of the game, these gifts are now available as a buyable DLC. Back at the beach we drink the strength elixir we just got, and in combination with our jump and featherwall cantrips we are now able to do some massive jumps that allow us to get to almost any position spot we want. And it also helps us to move around faster in general. Once we reach the roadside cliffs, we are going to stop at the unstable portal to kill Gale for our first inspiration point. Anytime we are going to get an inspiration point, we also get 25 XP. Which doesn't sound like much, but in the early game, these little XP points you get from your inspiration points actually play a rather major role in how fast you're going to get your first 3 to 4 level ups. As you can see here, by getting our second inspiration point from killing the wounded mind flayer, we already reached level 2. Even though we barely got any XP out of the tutorial. Now, before we do our level up, let's get our first, hopefully, 3 speed potions. Now, you might wonder, why 3? There are only 2 speed potions inside the hidden chest beneath this little rock. And that's of course true, but there's actually a 3rd speed potion in that area that many don't know of, which is probably due to the case that this speed potion is not always at the exact same place in every single one. At least not the same way the other 2 potions are. Because this speed potion is a guaranteed drop from one of the dead mind flayers in this area, and on top of the Nautiloid. In total there are 5 dead mind flayers who can have this speed potion. The first one you find on top of the Nautiloid, inside the room where you have your first tutorial fight against the imps. The second is the wounded mind flayer we just killed. 3rd and 4th are the 2 mind flayers lying next to the intellect devourers. And last but not least, the mind flayer lying between the intellect devourers and the wounded mind flayer. Now, one of them has a guaranteed chance of giving you a speed potion. You just never know who it is, as it's random who gets the drop. But it's still guaranteed that one of them will get it. So I recommend you check them all to get the speed potion, as they are most valuable in the early game where you're still unable to spam haste. At level 2 we take the evocation subclass, which honestly won't do much for us until we reach level 10, but it is what it is. At least we are able to learn evocation spells for cheaper now, and having to spend less money is always nice. For our spells we take Chromatic Orb and Thunderwave. Chromatic Orb is a very situational spell for us and only ever will come to use when Magic Missile is ineffective against our opponent. As for Thunderwave, this is also a situational spell, but its use is going to be a lot more common, since witches and cousins are everything but uncommon in this game. And with that, it's finally time to do everyone's favorite growth fight. For this encounter, we are going to use a little trick most of you probably already saw many times. By using Enhanced Leap in their Strength Elixir, we are able to improve our jump strength so high that we are able to jump up the walls of the grove. This will immediately trigger the cutscene and therefore start the combat like it would if you walked in front of the grove normally. The only difference now is of course that we are in a much better position to fight the goblins. From up here we are able to attack the goblins and then move outside of their range again, eliminating any chance of us getting hit. Once the battle is over, we do a quick detour and get the silver pendant. Through this amulet we are now able to cast guidance, which significantly increases our chances to pass all the checks inside the grove and get the maximum out of it.
That might be worth a look.
Now, before we go to Kagha, we first are going to talk to Octa, where we can get another inspiration point as Dark Urge. If we accept the food she offers us. Next we talk to Auntie and buy the invisibility and strength potions from her. These are two potions we are going to use over and over again, so whenever we can we will buy more of them, so we never run out. After that we go to Arca and stop her from killing Zasa, so we can kill her ourselves. And last but not least we are going to help Alfira finish her song. Once we've done all that, it's finally time to save Arabella, get Kagha's secret letter, and talk to Nettie. There we can also get our first Mindflay parasite once she left the room.
If everyone else minds their business, I'll be fine.
Now, normally at this point you would already hit level 3, but since I skipped most of the tutorial fight, this unfortunately is not the case for me. But we still are going to hit it very soon. Before we leave the grove, be sure to visit Maul in her cave, not only to get her quest to steal the idol for her later, but also to check her inventory, because sometimes she can sell you some good potions. And luckily for us, this is indeed the case, and we can buy an elixir of vigilance from her. A very important elixir for us that is going to be mandatory in some of the bigger fights in the first act, so be sure to grab it whenever you can. Alright, going forward we pick up Scratch, not only because he is the best boy, but also because we need him in at least 2 fights later in this one. In front of the Blighted Woods we then use the Shapeshifter mask to turn ourselves into a drow. This way the goblins will just let us pass and we get a bunch of XP for it, which finally pushes us past the level 3 mark. At level 3 we take Cloud of Daggers and Mirror Image for our new spells. Mirror Image will make it very hard for our enemies to hit us, increasing our AC by a total of +9, +3 for each Mirror Image. And combined with our shield reaction, it actually becomes impossible to hit us, unless they get a critical hit. As for Cloud of Daggers, this is going to be our main AoE damage spell until we hit level 5. Especially strong against surprised enemies, or just in general enemies who can take more than 2 hits from the cloud. Now, there are a few things we have to do in this village. First, we read this journal and pull out this dagger for a total of 30 XP. Then, you want to go inside the forge of this village and loot the entire place. I know, many of you don't enjoy the looting part of this game, yet I still recommend to loot this place, because in this forge we are going to find a bunch of thieves' tools and trap disarm toolkits. Enough of them that usually you never have to buy any of them again, for the rest of the game. Once we've done that, we go to the village center and lockpick the chest there to get the haste helm, which increases our movement speed for the first 3 turns in combat. Then we again abuse the fact that we look like a drow, get the goblins at the windmill to leave, and free Barkers, which again gives us a bunch of free XP. And last but not least we go into the cellar to get Shovel, the Bracers of Defense, and the Necromancy book. Since we still look like a drow, we can just walk inside the Goblin Camp and even get some free XP for it. Inside the Goblin Camp we then are going to buy the Bow of Awareness for a +1 to our initiative. Next we free Volo, killing the guards using Cloud of Daggers. Now you still need to be somewhat quick here, because there is still one Goblin commander patrolling this area and you don't want her to catch you. Also, once you freed Volo, don't forget to talk to him at your camp to actually finish his quest. After that we go to Waukeen's west to save Council of Chloric, who then in return will reward us with the Spell Sparkler, one of our main weapons that is going to stay with us for the entire game. With that we are also finished with everything we had to do on the surface, and it's time for us to go in the Underdark to get the remaining gear for our setup. So, back in the Goblin Camp, we show Guts our little kitten called Minor Illusion, like once or twice. Until she gives us the keys to her chambers. Sneaking past her guard, we will find ourselves in a room with a puzzle on the ground that normally would open the hidden door in front of us, but we don't actually have to solve it. As long as we pass the perception check next to the lever, we can just lockpick it and the hidden door will open. Once we get in the Underdark, we actually get another chance for some free XP in the Nautiloid outpost. If you pause the game right before the self-defense mechanism is about to kill the Minotaur, you can actually kill him yourself, which in return will give you 75 XP. It's important though that you are the one who does the final hit, as just dealing damage to him will not result in you getting any XP. Past the Nautiloid outpost, we then will be able to get our second main weapon, which we are going to use for the first 2 acts. By the way, I can't tell you how much it triggers me that Larian changed the way how the 2 buff versions from Falav Aloof are displayed. Since launch of the game, Shriek would be on the left side, the first option, while Sing would be on the right side, the second option. But now, for some reason, in one of the last patches, they changed that. And now I always end up casting Sing instead of Shriek because of muscle memory. Seriously, this shit drove me insane. Anyway, I just wanted to get that off my chest. Let's get back to it. Arriving at the Myrkul colony, we accept all the quests there, buy some bombs from Dareth, and the Psychic Spark from Blog. The Psychic Spark will allow us to cast one level 1 magic missile without having to spend a spell slot once per long rest, which is going to be quite useful for us in the early game, where we don't have that many spell slots yet. Though more important, we now will shoot an additional dart whenever we cast a magic missile. This might not seem like much, but combined with the passive ability from the Spell Sparkler and Shriek from Fala Aloof, this actually is a rather significant damage boost. Next we make our way to the Arcane Tower. Using invisibility we can easily bypass all the defensives and acquire the ingredients we need to finish Umelium's quest. But before we go back and finish this quest, we also make our way to the top of the tower to get the Guiding Light Wing from Bernard. This wing not only grants us access to the basement of the tower for some more loot, but also will be a pretty useful item to have once we enter the Shadowlands. Back to the Myrkul colony, we then finish Umelium's quest. Finishing his quest will give us the Survival Instinct Illithid Power, which is pretty useless for us since we aren't allowed to get hit anyway. However, by finishing his quest we also get access to him as a trader, and he has some good items to sell. First we are going to buy the Pearl of Power amulet from him, which lets us restore one of our spell slots up to a level 3 once per long rest. A very useful item to have for any kind of character that uses spell slots, as it allows you to refill one of your spell slots without having to take a long rest. For our second item we are going to buy the Boots of Stormy Glamour, which will add reverberation to our attacks, even further increasing our damage output. With that we now also finished our to-do list for the Underdark, and it's time for us to go to the Grymforge. To get to the Grymforge early, all you have to do is to sneak past the Dwager and then steal their ship. Simple as that. Just make sure you have the silver pendant equipped, as it's best to avoid any fighting in the middle of the lake. Upon reaching the Grymforge, we also reach level 4 and unlock our first feat. But first we pick Shocking Grasp for our new cantrip. With this cantrip we now have a decent melee attack and means to possibly disengage without the risk of taking an opportunity attack if the need should arise, which hopefully it never will. For our spells we take Misty Step and Invisibility, two utility spells that will help us avoid taking any hits. As for our first feat, we will take the Dual Wielder feat. With this feat we now can wield both the Spell Sparkler and Fala Aloof, allowing us to benefit from both their abilities at the same time. Now, at the Grymforge, we first gather some free XP by convincing some spiders to betray their masters, and by killing some mimics using the high ground. Just be sure to move back after each attack, otherwise the mimics will pull you down with their tongues. Once we've done all that, it's time for our first somewhat difficult fight. Or at least it would have been if I didn't fail to pacify the Deep Wolf, which actually turned out to be quite good for me, because now I can just push the Ranger and the Berserker into the chasm without having any kind of risk attached to it, simply because they aren't hostile towards me. So even if I fail to push them down, they won't attack me, but instead go for the Deep Wolf. On our next turn we just put some distance between us and the last remaining Draga, so we can simply outrange him once he turns on us. After we killed him, we can just use our bombs to destroy the rubble blocking the path, and after avoiding some pressure plates, we get to our final equipment piece and conclude our early game setup. Alright, having acquired everything I need for now, the first boss I want to take down is Grym. The reason for this is simply that I want to forge the adamantine armor and then sell it. This will give me a lot of money, more than enough in fact for the first act, so that I don't have to bother stealing stuff or turning into a loot goblin. But before we can go down into the forge, we need to get the 2 adamantine ores to be actually able to forge the armor. The first you will find behind a bunch of enchanted armors, and the easiest way to take them out is by simply grabbing 2 scissor flowers from the Underdark, by putting one of them next to the 2 enchanted armors staying together and keeping the other one in your inventory. You can stun them and simply throw them into the lava one by one. The other adamantine ore is guarded by a bunch of methods, hiding inside the lava. But this is actually to our advantage, because we can just sneak past them and get the ore without ever having to fight them. This simply works because they don't have a field of view, so they are unable to spot us. You just need to be a bit careful when destroying the ore, that you don't get too close to the lava, otherwise you will trigger the fight. In preparation for the fight against Grym, we are going to switch out Cloud of Daggers for Misty Step, and we are going to summon Shovel. I don't plan to actually use him in this fight, but if things go very wrong, he can be our last resort to potentially save this one. By using his ability to turn him invisible, he is able to help us out at any time without actually participating in this fight. After that we throw a speed potion next to the lever that activates the hammer, so we can collect it once the fight started. For our pre-boss we basically only use Flind, at least it's the only pre-buff that matters. Also, before you start the fight, make sure that you're able to apply Flind on yourself at least twice, because the initial 10 turns will not be enough to get you through this fight. Alright, let's get to it. At the start of the fight you want to fly to the other side of the arena and then position yourself at this spot. It's okay if you have a slight deviation in your positioning, just be careful it's not too much. Now, by staying here, you will cause Grym to stop right beneath the hammer when he's walking towards you, which will then allow you to get 2 free hits on him with the hammer. However, this will only be possible if you don't attack him on your first turn, because by attacking him you will trigger his legendary ability, which will give him a movement boost. And this movement boost will be enough for him to get in range to attack you. So you never want to attack him directly, and this actually goes for the entire fight. Because as some of you might have already guessed by my choices of debuffs in this fight, the game plan for this entire fight is simply to kite him. Now, before we can get our second degree hit on Grym, we have to refill the arena with lava so Grym overheats again. To refill the arena again, you can just use a range attack on the lava valve and it will activate. This way you don't have to fly over there and save your movement speed, which is very important. Now, the only reason this works is because of the way we positioned ourselves on the first turn. As you can see, while Grym stands beneath the hammer, one foot is still on the ground that floods with lava, which triggers him to overheat again. Now, we pick up our speed potion and fly all the way up, which by the way is also only possible from the extra movement speed we get from our speed potion. From up here, we then shoot the lever to activate the hammer for the second time. After that, you want to hide in this corner, because even though Grym is unable to reach you up here, the methods damn sure can. At this point, the methods will all fly over to Grym to attack him, even though they can't damage him, since they can't reach you. Now, we could technically leave our corner and attack the methods, but this would just be an unnecessary risk, so we just wait until Grym killed them all. Once he's done that, we fly over to the stone stairs and we apply Flight. Here our positioning will be very important again, because to be able to kill him with the hammer, we need to perfectly kite him. First, you want to stay a bit further back on the stairs, preferably right where the stairs become narrower again. By sitting here, Grym will walk right beneath you at the very edge of the arena. On the next turn, you don't want to fly down immediately, but instead fly to the very edge of the stairs. By doing this, Grym will walk back again and stop right before the inner wing of the arena, which is the exact position we want him to be in. Be careful though, as you don't want him to stay on top of the platform. It's okay if half of his foot is standing on top of the edge of the platform, but any more than that and Grym will walk right past the hammer and we won't be able to hit him. Once we achieve the setup, we fly down in the arena again to the exact opposite point Grym is standing, and by using dash, we are also able to reach this point without having to use a speed potion. After ending our turn, Grym will try to get to us again and stop right beneath the hammer, forcing him to take another big hit. After we hit him with the hammer for the third time, we use Misty Step to get back up again, since without haste or dash, we don't have enough movement speed to fly up there. Though alternatively, you can also use the Boots of Speed, as these give you a special dash ability that can be used via a bonus action. I just couldn't do that here, because for some reason I didn't equip them prior to this fight. Anyway, now we just repeat our kite against Grym once more and finish the fight. With Grym dead, we can now use the forge and forge our adamantine gear, where we ended up forging 2 adamantine splint armors, as they sell for the most money. Decision that will come back to bite me much later in this one. But we will talk more about that once we get there. Next point on our to-do list before we get to do any more boss fights is to hunt some hyenas and gnolls for a bunch of hyena ears that we then can use to craft us some more speed potions. After that I make my way into this farm to get Kagha's letter, which then in return will allow me to kill her without starting a purge inside the grove. But we are not going to try to kill her just yet, which honestly I don't know why I didn't option to kill her now, because after reaching level 5, which we do after this fight, we actually already have everything we need to safely kill her. I don't know, maybe I was scared because I died to her in a previous attempt, though with my current setup I really shouldn't be scared of her. Anyway, we reach level 5 and unlock our first level 3 spell slots, which comes with a lot of useful and very strong spells. The first spell we are going to pick is Counterspell, which is not your usual first pick for a wizard build, as in this stage of the game there are very few spells that are actually worth to counter. However, since we are not allowed to take any hit in this one, Counterspell actually becomes a very important spell for us, even in the early game, as this spell can save our run if you get attacked by an AoE spell, which in your normal one you truly wouldn't care about, as these type of spells barely deal any damage. For our second spell we take Haste, which is arguably the best pre-buff spell in the entire game. Now, there are actually two more spells we want to get this level, Fireball and Lightning Bolt, which we are going to learn through scrolls that we get from traders, since we can't learn more than 2 spells from a level up. Having these big AoE spells makes killing the goblins incredibly easy and safe now, since we just straight up one-shot them all at once. So through the goblins we can now get a bunch of essentially free XP to get to level 6 faster. With our 5th level we also get access to the tier 4 scrolls from traders, which we will immediately put to use in our next big fight. Now you don't need these scrolls to no-hit this fight, but if I already got some firewall scrolls, I might as well use them. After all, it only makes the fight easier and safer for us. Before we engage the Gnolls, we throw a speed potion as far forward as we can, so we can collect it once we engage them. With the help of an invisibility potion, we then move on top of the hill and use minor illusion to group them all up in a way that we can hit them all with firewall. Once the fight started, we will have a chance of forcing Flind to attack the other Gnolls by using our Illithid Powers. Now, if you fail these checks, it's not the end of the world, as Flind won't be able to do much against you as long as you keep your distance from her, and don't let her get any melee attacks on you. But for this one, we successfully influence Flind, which also means we don't want to pick up our speed potion just yet, but instead cast Shriek to increase our damage potential to the maximum for the next turn. By the way, the reason why we didn't use Shriek as a pre-buff is that Shriek can trigger a combat if you hit an enemy with it, even when you're invisible. On top of that, there's actually a decent chance that Shriek will run out before we trigger the fight if you're not fast enough in grouping them up. Anyway, since Flind became hostile to the other Gnolls, they now will gather around here to attack here instead of going for us, simply because Flind is the closest target for them. Now, because of that, we actually have them grouped up again for another nice AoE attack. However, this is a trap, so don't fall for it. Because by using an AoE attack, we would end up killing all the Gnolls and put ourselves into a 1v1 fight with Flind, which wouldn't be the end of the world. However, there's no reason for us to do that. Instead, we can just fire 2 level 1 magic missiles at Flind. This of course will turn her hostile towards us, but that doesn't matter, because she's still occupied with the other Gnolls. You could of course use higher level magic missiles, but this most likely would kill her and put us at risk to take a hit from the other Gnolls. Of course this is highly unlikely, as they basically have to get a critical hit against us to be able to hit us, but if you can avoid this risk, as small as it may be, there's no reason not to. Alright, after we finish off Flind, we unlock our Illithid Powers, and for once I'm actually going to use them in one of my runs. Starting out, we go for Call of the Week, which is actually a pretty substantial damage increase for us, because not only are we now able to kill an enemy before he actually reaches 0 HP, but we also start dealing some AoE damage, even when we use a single target attack. Now, I should mention that normally I would recommend to go for the Luck of the Far Realms first, because being able to turn a hit into a critical hit at will is very strong in the early game, and it also only requires you to get favorable beginnings before it, which is also a pretty good passive for the early game, unlike Concentrated Blast, that you have to get for Call of the Week, and which is just completely useless. However, because we have no spells in our current build that can land a critical hit, or miss its target, Call of the Week is a lot better for us. Alright, we proceed by killing the Zentarims to get their cargo, which contains the Iron Class Spectator. I'm not sure if I will actually use him, because by summoning him, I'm basically just using him as a meat shield to avoid taking any damage myself. And I don't want to do this, because this kinda ruins the point of this one. I'm still getting it though, because you never know what's going to happen. Next, we are finally going to kill Kagha to get the Ring of Protection. Now, before we start this fight, it's of utmost importance that you have an Elixir of Vigilance to boost your initiative for this fight. I truly mean it, do not start this fight without this elixir, because if you do, it's very likely that Kagha will get the first move on you, and with her Moonbeam, she has an attack with a guaranteed hit against you. And believe me, she will always use this spell if she can. Alright, after we finished our pre-buffing, we want to immediately pause the game, so that we can talk to Kagha without having to run after her. There, we reveal that we found out from the secret letter, so that we only have to fight the Shadow Druids and not everyone. This is actually also important, because if we don't do that, the other Druids will start slaughtering the Tieflings, and we won't be able to get the Ring of Protection anymore from Maul's quest. Anyway, because of the Vigilance Elixir, we now get the first move as planned. And because we passed our game, Kagha and the Shadow Druids are also still nicely grouped up for some fireball action. Before you start blasting them though, make sure to replace your Vigilant Elixir with a Bloodlust Elixir for the extra action point. This is mandatory if you plan to blast them with Fireball, because while all the Shadow Druids will die from the 2 fireballs, Kagha will survive. So you need an extra action point from the Bloodlust Elixir to be able to kill her as well. And you have to kill her on the first turn because of the Moonbeam spell. With Kagha and the Shadow Druids dead, we just have to finish the other 2 guys, which shouldn't be any problem, since they can't do shit anyway. After that, we then quickly steal the idol and hand it over for Maul for the Ring of Protection.
I had a feeling you...
Next we head over to the Owlbear, which at this point, to be honest, is just a complete rush, as we are already over leveled for this fight. Essentially all we got to do is to sneak up to her for the surprise attack and then blast her with magic missiles. This way we are able to kill her before she's even able to call her mate.
Very well. I'll strike you down.
Cub looks from you to his dead mother.
On our next long rest, we then trigger the next phase of our Dark Urge origin story and meet our butler, Skeletor's Fell, who tells us a bit of our past.
My, we will be reintroducing necrophilia to your schedule in no time.
Until he proceeds to give us the Deathstalker Mantle for our great deeds, which is one of the most broken items in the game, as it turns you invisible after a kill once per round. You still need to be a bit careful when using this cloak though, because going invisible can also be counterproductive in some situations, if it causes the fight to break. For example in a boss fight, which would cause the boss to fully heal. Alright, now it's time for us to clean up the rest of the Goblin Camp. For the first fight on the surface, we are heavily outnumbered, so to deal with that, we simply bait the goblins to follow us onto the bridge. Having them all perfectly lined up on the bridge, we just burn them all to death with a wall of fire. As for the remaining goblins that didn't follow us on the bridge, some simple mana illusion plus fireball will do the trick. Now to our main enemy inside the Goblin Camp, Dror Ragzlin. This boss fight is actually pretty easy, because we have so much AoE damage. For this fight we want to get behind him using invisibility, because from this position we have a much better angle on him and the goblins. You could also just sneak past him to get to this position, however this will take a lot more time and we would lose our pre-buffs, so we just use invisibility to avoid this. Now, from up here, we want to kill the goblins first, even though we could one turn kill Ragzlin. This is simply because some of the goblins have saving throw attacks that we cannot avoid through a shield reaction, and they are a lot more likely to hit than receiving a critical hit from Ragzlin. On top of that, they are all nicely grouped up, so that we potentially could kill them all in one turn by using 2 fireballs. If we get the damage rolls. Which I didn't. It's fine though, as the 2 surviving goblins don't have saving throw attacks. Now, after our attacks, we want to climb up the ladder, not necessarily because we want to keep the high ground, but because we want to get as far away as possible from Ragzlin. We want to do this because Ragzlin has the Illithid Repulsor ability, which is an attack that cannot miss. So it will just immediately end our run. On our next turn, I find myself in a bit of a pickle. Well, not really, I am just greedy and want to kill the 2 goblins while also dealing damage to Ragzlin. Luckily, I happen to have a scroll of Ice Storm in my inventory, which is just absolutely perfect for this situation. Because not only am I able to kill both of the goblins, while also dealing damage to Ragzlin, but it also creates an ice surface, which could cause Ragzlin to slip and skip his turn. Which is exactly what happened, and we essentially get a free turn to blast him with magic missiles. Unfortunately, it was not quite enough to kill him. Now, Shuffle could potentially kill him with only 7 HP left by getting a max damage roll, but it's a bit risky. Especially since the ice surface is still there and Shuffle could also just slip and not attack at all. I instead just end my turn and hope Ragzlin won't get a critical hit against me with his javelin throw. By the way, if you are scared that Ragzlin might be able to reach you, you can just destroy this ladder by shooting it, which forces Ragzlin to go all the way around if he wants to get to you. Anyway, let's kill him and move on. Before we can leave this place, however, we still have to kill Minthara, so let's just do that real quick. She's a free kill anyway. Oh, a juicy bridge kill. I feel scammed.
The step is the hardest.
GG easy. Clearly outplayed. Fully planned. I fully planned this, so she walked into my shriek hour. I am just better after all.
There's a parasite in that corpse.
Ah, before I forget, we also helped this furry guy escape. Solely for the XP. I mean it. I don't plan to finish this questline in the second act. It's simply not worth the risk. Alright, next we're going to visit our auntie for some nice tea. Just kidding, we're going to beat her up, as you do. But before we can do that, we have to take care of her redwoods. Wouldn't want anyone to interfere now, would we? Luckily for us, killing the redwoods is just a complete wash. Literally, since we are in a swamp. They are already red for us, and I can just knock them all out with a big charged load. Assuming the game would let us hit them all at once. Like for real, what the fuck is this? It's like the game deliberately tries to screw me over. Anyway, some magic missiles later, and we can enter our auntie's lovely home. Now, it's important that you drink an elixir of vigilance before you engage combat with her, as she only will flee and break the illusion on her second turn. Before that, she will always try to cast vicious mockery on you, which we need to avoid by any means possible. And for that we need the first move against her. Now, how do we avoid this attack from her? Well, we run. Not too far though, only far enough that she can't reach us and we stay in combat with her. This is important because if you leave combat, she won't break the illusion and retreat into her hideout. In our encounter with the masks, we of course want to keep one of them alive for the boss fight against the Hag. Normally I always would keep the Master of Regret alive, simply because she is the furthest away from us when entering the tunnel, and because of her high wisdom has also the highest chance of resisting the Hag's call. However, the Mask of Regret is actually one of the more dangerous masks, if she fails to resist the call and gets to attack you. So instead, for this one we will keep the Mask of Servitude alive, who doesn't pose any threat for us since she is a simple healer. At least that was the plan. Didn't quite work out like this, and we ended up with the Mask of Vengeance. But this is also fine. To start the fight against the Hag, we jump right next to her with the help of Enhanced Sleep and Featherfall. When we jump next to her, we will hit her with Shriek, which then triggers the combat and also reveals her. So you technically don't even need the invisibility for this fight. Unfortunately I messed up a bit here, because I jumped down too fast, or rather too early, after I finished pre-buffing. And I'm still missing one action point that I used to cast Shriek before. Which I honestly also think is kinda a bug, because if you look, you can see that I already have 2 action points when I'm jumping down to the Hag. But as soon as the combat starts, I lose this point again. However, I'm still partly at fault here, because I noticed that if you play a bit slower, this doesn't happen. Anyway, back to the actual fight. We will start out by shooting level 3 magic missiles at the Hag. This of course will trigger her legendary ability, but this is totally fine. She is only going to summon 2 illusions, and as long as not both of them use Sword Person, which by the way I've never saw them do, we can use Counterspell to avoid the possibility of getting stunned. As for Way of Sickness, this spell is basically irrelevant as long as we have Magic Mirror up and or a free reaction for shield. Now, because we inflict the Reverberation condition, we can also very easily find out who is the real Hag, as she is the only one with this condition.
At the ready.
Since I still had a bonus action left, I decided to walk up to her and hit her with an offhand attack for a bit of extra damage. Also, there was a very small chance that she falls prone because of Reverberation, and since she's going to waste her next turn anyway, I have nothing to lose. Speaking about wasting turns, on her turn the Hag will summon her enslaved servants, since we left one of them alive. And that's all she will do, so essentially by summoning her dead servants, she just gives us a free turn. Alright, on our next turn we just blast her again with level 3 magic missiles, which unfortunately is not quite enough to get her to surrender, as for the Hag to surrender she needs to be below 20 HP, and as for now she's at 25. To our predicament, she teleported herself all the way to the other side, and we can't reach her from up here. Since we have Shovel standing around though, I first tried to get her below 20 HP using him. But he missed. So now we have to get down there somehow to finish the fight, otherwise we could be in a bit of trouble, depending on how much Aaron Jesus loves us, or doesn't for that matter. Anyway, since we still had one mirror image active, I decided to take the opportunity attack for the mask instead of using a Misty Step scroll. Bit greedy perhaps, but worst case I have to use this turn's reaction to cast shield. However, the mask missed and we can jump down. Unfortunately not close enough to attack her right away, but we have enough movement left to get in range. Now, here we need to be a bit careful, because we obviously don't want to kill her, or we won't be able to get the Hag hair from her. But on the other hand, we also want to guarantee that she takes enough damage and surrenders on her turn. So, to guarantee that, I decided not to hit her with a full charge of magic missiles, but instead use only 2 on her. On her turn, she then surrenders and we can get the Hag hair from her, where we take the one with +1 to intelligence. For the fight against Nier, we will strike a deal with Brithra, as this will make the fight a lot easier. And for once I'm actually also keeping my end of the bargain and get rid of the Scrying Eye. Now, before we start the fight, we give the Boots of Speed to Twin for a bit of extra XP. Then we use our Smoke Powder to blow up the rubble and free Nia. After we blew up the rubble, we will immediately start pre-buffing. However, since Shriek only lasts for 5 turns, we will cast it a bit delayed compared to the other buffs, so that it doesn't run out too fast once we are in combat. Now, at the beginning of the fight, we want to focus our attacks on the Mind Masters, as they can enthrall our allies, which would complicate things a lot. But since we gave Twin the Boots of Speed, it's actually even more important for us to kill her, as she will always be able to reach us, and since she also has the Poison Spray ability, it would be a huge gamble to let her cast this on us. However, since we have the Blood Elixir, there's actually still a chance that we can kill all 3. All we have to do is to cast a level 3 Magic Missile on the Might Master von Mora, which should kill her. Guess that's not gonna happen then. Now, since we failed to one-shot the Mind Master, we have to content ourselves with only killing Swin and 1 Mind Master. Sad times indeed. Well, we get Swin into the range of Shriek, kill the one-shot Mind Master, and hit Swin with the remaining missiles. By killing the Mind Master, we trigger the Blood Elixir, which gives us another action point that we can use to finish Twin, and at least already deal some damage to the other Mind Master for later. After using our last action point, we then use our movement speed to leave the center of the battlefield to avoid being the main target of our enemies. On our next turn, we then finish off the last remaining Mind Master and kill the enemy ranger to claim the high ground for ourselves. From up here, we can now support our allies without being in the immediate field of danger ourselves. At this point, I actually had an amazing idea. While I was going through my scrolls, I noticed that I have a 70% chance to paralyze Nia. And I figured, why not go for it? Because if I hit this, we can just kill him without having to worry about his reflection mirror. It just would make our life so much easier. So I went for it. Yeah, let's not talk about this. This never happened. Yeah. Anyway, on our next turn, we kill the remaining enemy Draga, and I proceed with my fully thought out plan to paralyze Nia. Back to the Risen Road, we are now going to take out the Githyanki Patrol and open the way to the Crèche, our last stop for the first act. For this encounter, we throw a speed potion on the lower platform from the bridge, which you can collect once the combat starts. This way, we don't have to use haste, which opens up our concentration slot for a different spell, and by collecting the speed potion only after the combat starts, we get the full 3-turn duration, which is also more than enough for this fight. Now, we just wait until the Githyanki position themselves in a way that allows us to hit all 4 of them at once. Now, we pick up our speed potion and use our free concentration spell to cast Firewall, which already kills off 2 of them. Careful though, as we didn't use invisibility or sneaked before attacking, we didn't get a surprise attack, so we cannot get close to the remaining 2 Githyanki for the extra shriek damage, as this would be way too risky. Instead, we just back up, let them come to us, and then finish them with magic missiles. Arriving at the Crèche, we first collect these 3 ceremonial weapons, mainly just for the extra XP, as the reward for solving this puzzle is just a buff that affects weapon damage, which we barely ever use. Also, I'm finally going to use my tadpoles to increase my Illithid Powers. Yeah, I guess it's pretty obvious that I basically never use these powers as I keep forgetting to upgrade them. But whatever, as I already said, they don't matter for the first act anyway, so as long as I remember to take them when they do, we are fine. Alright, once we arrived at the entrance, we can start going on our usual killing spree. As for the guards at the entrance, a simple minor illusion plus double fireball will do the trick. Just don't forget to move so they won't catch you if they succeed their saving throws against your attacks.
Cakes of...
These boots have seen everything. Well, so much for peace.
With the killing of these guards, we now also get to level 6, which gives us the potent cantrip passive ability. An ability that is pretty useless, if I'm being honest, because at this point of the game you shouldn't really go around anymore casting cantrips. They are just massively outscaled by the spells you've unlocked at this point. Speaking about spells, while we don't unlock anything new, we can learn 2 additional spells. However, as we don't get anything new, there isn't anything super interesting for us. We do want to pick Glyph of Warding though, as this spell can be useful later in this one, due to the variety of damage types it offers. Back to the Crèche, we continue our killing spree, starting with the guards that are roaming the halls. Once we cleaned up the halls, we get to the Zaith'isk, which is quite the important moment for us, as later in this one it's kinda mandatory that we have the Awakened passive ability, so that we can get through all the fights to come as safely as possible. Now, as a wizard, we actually have very good attributes for passing the saving throws of the Zaith'isk. However, as you can see, I only have 1 inspiration point at the moment, and this just makes it way too risky for me, trying to acquire the Awakened ability right now. So I'm going to skip this part of the Crèche for now, and come back later, once I have 4 inspiration points to spend. And since we won't need the Awakened ability until much later in this one anyway, we don't lose anything by delaying this. Alright, since we are skipping the Zaith'isk, for now there isn't anything left to do for us except making our way to the Inquisitor, the final boss for this act. Against the Inquisitor, we will first group him up with the other Githyanki by using Minor Illusion, preferably in a way that allows us to hit all of his allies with a big AoE attack without hitting him. The reason for that is that the Inquisitor has the Psychonic Revenge passive ability, which would deal up to 4 psychic damage to us when he succeeds a saving throw against us. And since we are playing a no-hit one, it's totally out of the question to ever hit him with any kind of saving throw ability, as this could immediately end our run. Now, for our attack against the Githyanki, we are going to use scrolls and not our own spells. The reason for that is simply that we want to save our spell slots for Vargas, so that we can spam high-level magic missiles against him.
Crèche Y'llek, with me, to the death.
Before we hit the Githyanki with a second AoE scroll to finish him off, we will replace our Elixir of Vigilance with a Blood Elixir, so that we can get an extra action point for one of the kills. By the way, the Elixir of Vigilance is our most important debuff for this fight, as we wouldn't be able to guarantee our first move against Vargas without it. So don't be lazy and start this fight with the Blood Elixir active, it will get you killed. Anyway, we fire our second AoE attack against the Githyanki to finish them off. Unfortunately though, one of them succeeds the saving throw and survives. Bit annoying, but nothing we can do about it. Vargas now also used his legendary action and summoned one Mind Clan next to us. Now, he can do this because his legendary action actually can also trigger when one of his allies gets hit. I am not sure why he didn't already use his legendary ability on our first attack. I guess it's simply not guaranteed that he uses it when his allies are hit, and we simply got lucky there. I'm not sure though. So if anyone knows why he didn't use it, please let me know in the comments. Because we have the Deathstalker Mantle, we turn invisible from our kills, which just allows us to move away from the Mind Claw without having to take an opportunity attack. Now, my idea here was to move next to Varvagas and the remaining Githyanki and use Blink to hopefully disappear and get Varvagas to skip his turn. I wanted him to skip his turn because on his first turn he always uses his Mind Steal Link ability, which causes him to use an action point, meaning he won't be able to attack after using this. So essentially, by getting him to skip his turn, I will simulate the surprise condition on him, giving me another free turn to deal damage to him, even though he can't actually get surprised. And Blink was my solution for this. However, we didn't disappear. To be fair, I don't even know if this would actually work, as Varvagas always teleports and uses his Mind Steal Link for his first turn. So he might just be hard-coded to do this no matter what, and I was doomed to fail from the start. Anyway, next turn we use level 1 magic missiles to kill the Githyanki barrier and then jump next to the Inquisitor to get him into the Shriek radius for max damage. I am also only doing this because I still have 29 AC for my 2 mirror images, so it's quite unlikely that he will hit me. However, if I knew this would have happened, I also wouldn't have done this. Or rather, I would have cancelled the blink spell. Because apparently, if you blink to the ethereal plane, you stop your concentration. Which I didn't know. So because of this, my plan from before also just would not have worked, as I just lost a turn. I guess this is what happens if you start overanalyzing your fights and do stupid things because of this. Because honestly, that I got through this fight here was just pure luck, more than anything else. I truly just should have died here. Well, we still have to kill the Inquisitor though, so it's not over yet. But yeah, very poorly played for me here. Anyway, I left the ethereal plane and blasted him with our last level 3 magic missiles. Where I also just got scammed, unleashing only 3 missiles at him instead of the expected 6. Whatever, we are now forced to use a Misty Step scroll anyway to get away from him and his mind class. Otherwise we will get swamped, which makes it quite likely that we will get hit by at least one of them. Varvagas will then take chase, which puts him into range for us to kill him with 2 level 2 magic missiles after drinking a speed potion. Now that we finally killed him, without any issues at all, a perfectly played fight as always, we can loot this place into the glass of belligerent skies, to inflict even more reverberation on our enemies. Now, to get out of the Crèche, we will go into the secret chamber that leads to the Blood of Lathander, as this territory doesn't count as hostile territory, so we can just teleport away and conclude the first act. Upon entering the Shadowcursed lands, we will immediately take use of the guiding lightning that we took from the arcane tower and cast light on ourselves, or rather on our main weapon. This will now allow us to walk safely inside the first area of the Shadowcursed lands without having to carry a torch to protect us from the Shadow Curse, which is going to be very useful for our first few encounters in that area. Once we reach the pilgrims, we are going to force the Goblin warrior to fetch the bone he threw, which will trigger an inspiration for us since we are playing Dark Urge. Then we turn Shovel invisible and group up the pilgrims so we can kill them.
Time to rest.
We are doing this because this will make Kagha's legendary ability completely useless, as he has no allies without the pilgrims, and it will be much easier and safer for us to kill him at the ambush spot. When we are fighting the pilgrims, we still need to be a bit careful, since Kenseth can cast Cloud of Daggers and Fireball, which of course would immediately end our run. So make sure that you have counterspell active before engaging this fight. For the fight itself, there is not much to say. We just blast him with AoE attacks and then take the high ground to avoid having to take any unnecessary risk against the Berserker. Now, after playing the loot to call Kagha, make sure to equip the silver pendant and, even more important, cast mirror image on yourself as a precaution before talking to him, since we have to pass a conversation check against him, otherwise he will attack us. And he definitely will get the first move, so if you don't do this, we are just dead. Alright, since we are playing as Dark Urge, we are not as bad off as other characters because of our intimidation proficiency. And together with guidance from the silver pendant, we actually have a decent chance to pass this check. Which we then do on our second try, and now it's time to lead him into the ambush to get the Moon Lantern. Since this is a very dangerous fight, even without any of the pilgrims, you do want to go through your entire pre-warp process, as if you would go into a boss fight. Which I guess it actually is, since Kagha's got a legendary ability now. Either way, once you approach the hiding harpers, make sure to take a good look at your character. And that's why. When you are approaching the harpers, you have to pass a perception check, which will decide if you're going to be surprised or not. And if you fail this check, like me, you don't want to side with the harpers. Well, technically you never want to side with the harpers, but especially not if you're surprised. Because Kagha's initiative is so high, he will always go first, and since you are the closest to him, it's very likely that he will attack you first. Which on the first turn wouldn't be a big issue, since he basically has to get a critical hit to hit you, as long as you have all of your mirror images up. But this won't be the case on the second attack anymore, and because you're surprised, he will be able to attack you again before you can do anything, which most likely will kill you. Now, even with Kagha on our side, getting surprised here is still pretty rough for us, as the Harper Elendale has the Magic Missile spell. And while we are surprised, we won't be able to protect ourselves from the spell with the shield reaction. Luckily, Kagha decided that his first victim is said Harper, saving us from a potential disaster. It's probably best to just pre-warp an Elixir of Vigilance to avoid getting surprised here, but my greedy ass didn't want to, and I almost paid the full price for it. Anyways, once we finally get our first turn, it's time to start dealing some damage to Kagha and take advantage of our Harper meat shields, as long as we can. After we blasted him with our magic missiles, we jump up to the destroyed cottage with the help of Enhanced Sleep. From this position we are pretty much safe from all attacks, but more importantly we get Kagha to focus his attacks on the Harpers and not on us. On our next turn we jump down again and get him into our shriek range to maximize our damage. After our attacks we then simply run back up again, as we still have most of our movement speed points left from using jump to get down here. The Harpers then unfortunately failed to finish Kagha, but this actually opens up a pretty good opportunity for us, and that is to use AoE attacks to kill them all at once. So I was considering here to throw some bombs at them and get the job done, which definitely would be the best move here. However, I decided against it, as I didn't consider the remaining Harpers as strong enough to pose any real threat to us. Which I guess is true, but why take the risk of receiving a critical hit? It's not like that the bombs are expensive or that I was low on resources. Just an unnecessary risk caused by greed once more. I guess I never learn. Either way, we are able to clean up the remaining Harpers without any trouble and then take the Moon Lantern from Kagha. Once we took the Moon Lantern, we of course are going to free the Pixie, as it's just way more convenient to have the Shadow Curse protection as a passive condition from the Pixie than to actually having to use the Moon Lantern. Through the Pixie Blessing we can now immediately make our way to Moonrise Towers, where we go on a little shopping tour. For now though, the only trader that is of interest for us is Arash, the Blood Merchant, as she sells a bunch of potions, most notably the Elixir of Battle Mage's Power, which increases our Arcane Acuity. However, this is not all, because if we have Astarion in our party, we can force him to bite her, which in return gets us the Potion of Everlasting Vigor, a potion that permanently increases our strength by 2, and even though we are an intelligent based character, getting this potion is actually somewhat important for us, since we start to approach the part of the run where we stop using the Strength Elixir as our main elixir, replacing it with the Blood Elixir. And by getting the Potion of Everlasting Vigor, we are now able to keep our athletics at a decent level. To be fair, once we are able to fly, this will become totally irrelevant, but for now these extra points will come in handy. Once we are done shopping, we quickly go up the waypoint at Last Light Inn, and then make our way back to the first arc, as there are still 2 boss fights left that I forgot to do. The Spectator and the Spider Queen. For the Spectator, the only way for us to fight him without having to take huge risk is to trigger him from the Selûnite outpost. By simply shooting one of the petrified drows from up here, we can get him to spawn without actually engaging into combat. Then we throw a speed potion just outside the outpost and wait until the Spectator moves right beneath the slope, because now we can get him into our shriek range and maximize our damage output against him. This still won't be enough to immediately kill him, so after our attacks we have to run and hide like the cowards we are. But by doing this we get a very consistent and safe kill on him. Alright, Spider Queen. Probably one of the fights where I was most afraid of getting hit, simply because this is a fight I barely ever do. I just tend to sneak past her, grab the Dark Amethyst, and then never come back. So I'm definitely not as familiar with the mechanics of this boss fight compared to any other boss fight really. But part of this one is to do every single boss fight. So let's get to it. For this encounter, we have to consider that the Spider Queen has very high initiative, which means that we have to use an Elixir of Vigilance as one of our pre-buffs. Otherwise we won't be able to get the first move against her. Once we've taken care of that, we prepare our pre-buffs so that we can immediately cast them in quick succession once the Spider Queen walks onto the left web bridge. By using Fireball, we then can deal damage to her while also destroying the web bridge, causing her to take some extra fall damage. Now, since she is very close to another face spider, it's of course very tempting to just cast another Fireball and deal damage to both of them, potentially even one-shotting the face spider, if we get a very high damage roll. However, I wasn't sure if this wouldn't trigger her legendary ability. Now, if he goes strictly after the tooltip, the answer would be no, as it specifically states spiderlings, which are the babies she hatches from her eggs during the fight. However, you can't always trust the tooltips of this game, and because of my unfamiliarity with this fight, I decided not to risk it. Even more so, as this legendary ability would just immediately kill me. Instead, we go for the classic Magic Missile for the highest possible damage. After we did our attacks, we then go as far away from the spiders as possible. Not because we are scared of the Spider Queen, far from it, as she is hard-coded to hatch her eggs on the first turn anyway. However, if we stay here, all the face spiders and spiderlings will teleport next to us and attack us all at once, which would be very bad. So I decided to drink a flying potion to put as much distance as possible between me and the spiders. Technically, I believe my movement speed alone would have been enough to put enough distance between me and the spiders, so they can attack me, but I wanted to play it safe. Also, by using the flying potion, we are even able to hide behind this corner, which also prevents the face binders to spit poison on us. Plus, the AI will always try to close the distance between you. So by putting that much distance between us, there's a good chance the Spider Queen will walk onto the right side web bridge. Now, I'm about to do something very dumb. Obviously, we have a very nice setup here to cast Fireball, and there's nothing wrong with it. Actually doing this, in fact, I would argue, is the best possible move here. But that only applies if you stay out of the Gossamer Tomb's range, which is 30 meters. And while it looks like there could be a 30 meter distance between us, I didn't check. Yeah, I got saved there by the angle chains since I destroyed the web bridge. I would like to say I knew this would happen and everything was calculated, but that would be a lie. Still, interesting to know that you could potentially get her to miss her legendary attack. Though there's still room to debate here how useful this actually is, since you could just stay out of the range to begin with. Anyways, back to the actual fight, we use our last level C magic missile on the Spider Queen, which unfortunately is not quite enough to finish her off, but at this point this barely matters as we still have all our magic mirrors up and the flying potion to avoid any melee encounters to begin with. For the rest of the fight we then simply use magic missiles to kill the queen plus the remaining 2 face binders, and through the flying potion we are also able to kite them, avoiding any melee encounters and basically fighting them in 1v1s as well.
I wonder what's down there.
Back at Last Light Inn we buy the Cloak of Protection, which is now going to be our main cloak. We want this cloak over the Deathstalker Mantle simply because the additional armor class and saving throw will be more important for us going forward than being able to turn invisible, especially in boss fights. For now though, there won't be any boss fights. Instead, we are going to kill all of the roaming enemies in the Shadowcross lands to acquire a bunch of XP and get to level 7.
You picked the wrong fight, friend.
At level 7 we now unlock our first level 4 spell slot, which is going to be very useful for the upcoming fights. Not necessarily for the ability to cast level 4 spells, we kinda were able to do that anyway to our scrolls. It's because we now can cast level 4 magic missiles and deal some ridiculous damage against bosses, just melting through them. As for the new spells that we can learn, we want Knock and Firewall. Knock might look like an odd choice considering that it is most commonly used in the 3rd act and not the 2nd. However, this spell actually is mandatory for us once we enter the Gauntlet of Shar, as this is the only spell that can save us from certain doom. Alright, next up we make our way into the prison of Moonrise Towers to free the prisoners there. Big surprise, I know. For that we first are going to kill all the guards to avoid any inconveniences once we get the prisoners out of their cells. Now, we have to be a bit careful here that we don't trigger them all at once. Otherwise this might end very badly for us. The best way to split the guards is by starting to kill the Zealot Nadi, standing at the very end of the prison, and Adept Karis, who is patrolling this area. The fight itself is very simple as we just use Mana Illusion to group them up and then kill them with Fireball and Magic Missiles. Just don't forget to sneak before you attack them, otherwise you won't get the surprise attack.
Softer than a whisper.
Once that's done, our next target will be the Warden, who is definitely the most dangerous enemy in this area, as she has attacks that are guaranteed to deal damage to us. So preferably we take her out before she even gets tagged. To do that we pre-buff ourselves before we even enter the tower. This is something we do because on top of the tower is another Scrying Eye, which will just immediately reveal us when we try to turn invisible inside the tower, essentially ruin our chances to get a surprise attack on her. Of course, when you are trying to get a surprise attack, It would be helpful not to stand in the immediate field of view of your enemy. But what do I know? Anyway, if we are playing our cards right, we still can kill her in one turn. So I prepared a speed potion for Shuffle to destroy, so we don't have to waste our bonus action to drink it. And then we just blast her with high level magic missiles and hope for the best. Yeah, pretty sad damage rolls on our side there. Well, now we have only one move left, and that is to walk up to her, hit her with an offhand attack for a little bit extra damage, and then stay next to her. By standing right next to her, we prevent her from using her AoE attacks, as she would kill herself by using them. And if she tries to run away from us, I believe we would deal enough damage to kill her with an opportunity attack. For the remaining guys, we just group them up again, and through the surprise attack plus haste, we can take them all out before they even get to act. And with no guards left to stop us, we then can free all the prisoners and conclude these quest lines. Alright, now it's finally time to go on our Thorm killing tour. Starting out with Gerringothe Thorm, we of course need to get rid of all our money before engaging her, otherwise she will just blow us up. Now, preferably you want to time your pre-buffing process so that you are finished once she is walking by the balcony or standing in front of it. Unfortunately I fucked this up, because for some reason I decided to look at her stats before pre-buffing, which cost me valuable seconds and I ended up missing the time frame. Well, and now I am just standing here, awkwardly, waiting for her to return. Once she's back, we then can pause the game and try to push her out of the Troll House using Thunder Wave. Well, try was the keyword, as we failed. This is not a big problem however, as we still have all our mirror images up and we are broke, so she can't really do anything to us. Now, in case you wondered what the hell this zero damage shit just now was, for some reason she decided to use her gold explosion ability, despite us having 0 gold in our inventory. No idea why she did that. I actually never even saw her do that before, which I guess makes sense, as in our current setup this ability is totally useless. Anyways, let's get back to something that is actually useful, throwing Gerringothe out of the Troll House. Nice. Now, since we already used one of our action points when we engaged Gerringothe, we unfortunately can't kill her in this turn. And this is something that is actually important to consider, as this means her flying skulls are still around, and as long as this is the case, we are not out of danger. Far from it even, as these flying skulls have the Death Streak ability, which is an attack that we can't avoid. This means we now have to make use of our flying potion, get on top of the roof, and then fly as far back as we can, so they can't reach us. On our next turn, we then use Dash to get back on the other side, and kill Gerringothe using magic missiles.
Free from the curse now. Perhaps you'll find peace.
Next up is Thisobald Thorm, and against him we just attack one of the zombies to trigger the fight, so we can get them to follow us outside the waning moon, where we can kill them all from a safe distance. And by going through these big roots, we even get Thisobald to, well, essentially getting him stuck, as he will just sit behind these roots doing nothing, as he is too fat to get through them. Perhaps not the most honorable way to fight him, but this guy has too many AoE attacks. I am not risking it.
Pity we had to kill him. He seemed more lonely than cruel.
And last but not least, we take on Malus Thorm. Against Malus Thorm, the best way to approach him is through the back door from the House of Healing, as from this side you just have a better angle on him and his sisters. Now, in preparation of this fight, we threw a speed potion on the ground so we can collect it once the fight started for the full 3-turn duration. We are also doing this because I decided to use Firewall as my concentration spell for this fight, instead of the usual haste. Of course, Poison Cloud would have been a lot better for this fight, since both Malus and his sisters have fire protection. Unfortunately though, I didn't have the Poison Cloud scroll, so Firewall was the only alternative left. which is completely fine by the way, as Fireball will still be able to do some decent passive damage against him if we can get the surprise attack. Talking about fire protection, this of course means that we want to replace our Fireball spell with the Glyph of Warding spell, as Fireball will be of little use for us here. Now, once we're fully prepared, we can start pre-bopping and trigger the fight using Firewall. Yeah, I'm not sure why we didn't get the surprise attack here. This should have worked, but for some reason it didn't. Oh well, this is of course a bit inconvenient, but nothing that poses a big game-losing threat for us. At least not yet. Now, since Malus moved directly in front of us, we have the perfect setup for a lightning bolt. So perfect in fact, that I even briefly considered to use a level 4 lightning bolt. This of course would have been a mistake, as it's still a lot more valuable to be able to cast a level 4 magic missile. And luckily I ended up with the same conclusion and settled with a standard lightning bolt. Since we already killed the patient with our initial attack, we won't be able to trigger our blood elixir with this attack. However, once we picked up our sweet potion, we will trigger it with our follow-up attack by killing 2 of the sisters. For a brief moment I even considered to use another AoE attack to kill the remaining sisters. However, this would have been a bit of a waste, as it's quite likely that they die from the firewall anyway. On top of that, we have Malus in our shriek range, so it's a perfect moment to just hit him with our level 4 magic missiles for maximum damage. Alright, after using all of our action points, we now want to leave the House of Healing to put some distance between us and Malus, so that he can't reach us. On our next turn, we drink a flying potion and fly back inside to get him into our shriek range and maximize our magic missile damage. Drinking a flying potion is important here, as without it we wouldn't have enough movement speed left to leave the House of Healing again. Anyways, we are starting to run into a bit of trouble here, as I run out of spell slots, and after some debating what to do, I came to the conclusion that the only way to safely kill Malus Thorm is by refilling our spell slots mid-combat. Yep, this is actually something you can do by using the Angelic potions, who give you the effects of either a short or long rest after being asleep for 2 turns. Now, this obviously means that we need a safe space where we can take a quick nap for 2 turns, after using our action points to deal a bit more damage to Malus. We fly on top of the roof, where we then drink a potion of Angelic Reprieve to regain our level 1 and 2 spell slots, which will be more than enough to kill Malus. And as it's quite literally impossible for Malus to reach us up here, we can take our quick nap up here without any worries whatsoever. Once I woke up again, I noticed something very funny. I am able to hit Malus with my magic missiles from up here. Yeah, I don't even know what to say. This is just completely busted and frankly should not work. Alright, with all of the Thorm siblings dead, we make our way into the Gauntlet of Shar, where we will get our 4th inspiration point for bleeding the corpse dry. Which then will finally give us the chance to pass the Zaith'isk. Now, for the fight against Balthazar, we want to put knock into our prepared spells, as we needed to force open a certain door during this encounter. It's by the way important that we jump towards the skeleton warrior, otherwise we won't have enough movement speed left to both open the door and get out of the chaos that's about to unfold. By opening the door to Balthazar's chambers, we force him to join the fight, which will make it a lot easier for us to kill him, as he will lose the fight against the Justiciars if we don't help him. Now, normally I would immediately attack Balthazar and his undead servants, so we turn them hostile and get XP when they die. However, I decided that for this one, it's better to first get rid of the Umbral Tremor in front of me, so I won't be under any pressure during this fight, at least for the beginning. After destroying this Umbral Tremor, I then started working on getting Balthazar and his undead servants to turn hostile, which they will do after you attack them twice. Unless of course you use magic missiles, but I didn't want to waste any spell slots on this because I'm definitely going to need all of them for this fight if I don't want to get overrun by Justiciars. Now, once most of the Justiciars spawned and made their way over to the zombie medics, we want to use Firewall to start dealing some passive damage to all of them. And since most of the time this will occur at the center of the room, we also essentially get to split it in half, which will cause the AI to just run through it over and over again. Anyways, at this point we are just going to fly back and forth, trying to pick up the low HP Justiciars whenever we can, and start taking out the Justiciar Rangers, which are actually the ones that deal the most amount of damage to Balthazar and his allies. However, once they start getting overrun, which they inevitably will at some point, we have to get a lot more involved in this fight and actively look for opportunities where we can get some good attacks off that kill a lot of Justiciars. Like this one for example, where Flash is surrounded by a bunch of Justiciars that we can easily take out with some fireballs. And that's basically how you play the rest of this entire fight. Be very observant on what's going on and look for opportunities where you can deal a lot of damage to the Justiciars. And never attack Balthazar in any way, shape or form, because at this point he already used all of his spell slots anyway, so he is no longer a real threat for you anymore. However, since he is reviving his zombies over and over again, he is buying you a lot of time to take out all of the Justiciars, so you want to keep him alive as long as possible. This of course doesn't mean you should go out of your way to save him, just don't work against him. Okay, hopefully I was able to shed a bit of light on how I approach this fight, even if it might be a bit confusing. I don't know, I feel like it's always a bit hard to break this fight down since it's such a big mess. It would be a lot easier if I just show you the entire fight, but that shit is just way too fucking long. So hopefully this breakdown was acceptable. Anyways, through killing Balthazar, we now have 4 inspiration points and can finally attempt to pass the Zaith'isk. Before that, however, we are going to read the Necromancy book to get the Forbidden Knowledge passive feature, which also is going to help us to pass the checks of the Zaith'isk. Unfortunately, we can't immediately get to the Zaith'isk, as there are still some Githyanki left inside the Crèche, which are now hostile towards us. So we have to get rid of them first, but this is no issue at all, they are just some simple guards after all. Alright, with that, it's now finally time to enter the Zaith'isk and become awakened. As I already said in the first act, since we are playing a wizard, we have the perfect class to get past these checks, since we are both proficient in intelligence and wisdom saving throws. And together with all the other buffs we collected, getting past the first 2 saving throws is rather easy. Easy doesn't mean guaranteed though, as you can see here, as I failed to roll a 15 while having a +8 bonus. Which is exactly why we want to have all 4 inspiration points for this interaction, so we can make up for the occasional bad roll. Anyways, after successfully getting past the last saving throw, we get the Awakened passive feature, which turns all our Illithid Powers into bonus actions. Something that will be incredibly powerful once we reach the late game. At level 8 you basically can take whatever spell you want, as we already have all the spells we want up to level 4. I decided to go with Blight and Ice Storm, as both of them are decent damage spells. Ice Storm in particular can also be very useful in the Storm of Moonrise Towers, due to its massive radius and the fact that it creates an ice surface. Either way, at level 8 we also unlock our next feat, and in this case there isn't much to debate on what we take, as at this point we just have to take Alert, so we no longer have to worry about not getting the first move in combat. Which, surprisingly, is the most important part of a no-hit one. Okay, I lied. Maybe it's pretty obvious. What is a surprise though, is me remembering to upgrade my Illithid Powers. For our upgrades we get displays for the extra fall damage, which can come in handy from time to time. Then we get the ability Drain to weaken our enemies, and Psychonic Overload for some extra damage if we need it. Since we barely have any HP, we have to be very cautious though when we end up using Psychonic Overload, which I don't plan to, but you never know what's going to happen. Alright, back inside the Gauntlet of Shar, we do the trials and collect all of the Umbral gems. And yes, I used Shadowheart for the Faith Leap trial. I am not dying to a stupid bug that far into the one. Not happening. Getting to the final trial, the self-same trial. This trial is actually quite the dangerous endeavor for us, so there is only one thing we can do.
Off with your clothes.
Now, taking off our clothes alone won't win us the fight, it just makes our mirror a bit weaker. That's all. To beat our mirror, we have to sneak past it, so we can attack it from behind, and also cast haste on ourselves, which we need if we want to kill it in one turn.
Can't risk.
Now, when we are going to attack our mirror, we don't want to use any spells, because like us, it has counterspell. Instead, we want to throw bombs, which our mirror can't avoid, and also will deal a lot of extra damage to our Callous Glow Ring.
Here goes nothing.
Alright, against Yuria, we first want to take out the Displacer Beast while still isolated. It's pretty important that we do this, as she can cause a lot of trouble for us if we let her survive for the main encounter. Also, by doing this, Yuria and his Mergons will already be revealed when we walk up to them, so that's useful too. Now, for the actual encounter against Yuria, we need to pay a lot of attention on how we approach him to make this a safe kill. The way we want to approach Yuria is by using a flying and invisibility potion to get close to him so we can get him into our Shriek range. Which is important because without Shriek he might survive our attacks, and we definitely can't have that in this one. Now, the flying potion is mandatory for this, because otherwise you won't be able to get down there fast enough before Shriek runs out. When you are flying down there, it's also important that you don't hit anyone with your Shriek radius, as this will immediately trigger the combat. And of course we only want the combat to start once we are in position. As for Yuria's stats and abilities, you only have to consider his initiative, because this is this type of fight whose victor is determined by who is getting the first move. At this point our initiative is actually higher than the one from Yuria, so we will get the first move most of the time, and since I'm the type of guy who likes to roll the numbers, that's good enough for me. However, if that doesn't apply to you, there are still a bunch of items left in the second act that you can get to make sure you will get the first move every single time. Alright, the way we are going to kill Yuria in one turn is quite straightforward actually. We just blast him with our level 4 magic missiles. This might seem a bit ambitious at first, and of course magic missiles alone wouldn't be able to cut it. However, since we collected a bunch of items that directly affect our magic missiles and increase their damage, it's not even close. After we killed Yuria, we immediately fly away to put some distance between us and the Mergons. Another reason why this flying potion is mandatory for this fight, so we don't get overwhelmed by the Mergons. Now, the Mergons are of course all going to rush towards us, which gives us the opportunity to utilize the last turn of our Shriek buff and deal a lot of AoE damage to them. For the first time we also have Glyph of Warding come into play here, as this AoE spell lets us pick a damage type the Mergons are not resistant to. Okay, at this point there isn't much to say for this fight. We just pick up the low HP Mergons by utilizing our flying potion, so they never will be able to overwhelm us.
What the hell has been happening here?
Now, before we enter the Shadowfell, there is still one main encounter left, which I avoided so far, and that is saving Isobel. Now, normally I would do this fight as soon as I get here, so we can get the Blessing of Selûne from her. The Blessing of Selûne is something that we normally would want, not because of the Shadow Curse protection, but because it gives you resistance to necrotic damage. And since there's a lot of necrotic damage in the second act, it's actually a pretty powerful buff. Now, since this is a no-hit one, this buff is of course useless for us, which is why I saved this encounter for last. Anyway, the fight itself is not that difficult. The only enemy that poses some kind of threat towards us is Markus, since he has the vampiric shout ability. However, if we just first turn kill him, we don't have to worry about anything. And since we already have 2 level 4 spell slots, well, ain't that much of a challenge.
I'm coming for you.
For the rest of the fight, we just want to stay close to Thisobald, killing all the winged powers that threaten her, and heal her if need should arise. But let's be real, at our current power level, they won't even be able to properly reach her. Alright, next we are going to kill the guards in front of Moonrise Towers. We want to do this because once we initiated the last phase of the second act, they are going to die anyway. And by killing them right here and now, we at least get some XP for it. You have to consider though that by killing these guards you will turn everyone inside Moonrise Towers hostile. So make sure you only do this at the very end of the second act, and also check all the traders one last time, so you don't miss out on anything. Either way, last but not least we are also doing a quick detour back to the area of the first act. There we go through all the traders one last time to stock up on scrolls, potion and so on. However, the main reason why we go back there is because there is still one quest left that I haven't officially finished, which is bringing Nir's head to the Myconid colony. Now, the reason why we haven't finished this quest is because the reward for this quest is the temporary Bliss Spores condition, which lasts until your next long rest. And by finishing this quest right before we enter the Shadowfell, we get to use this condition against Ketheric and Myrkul, as long as we don't take another long rest. Which we don't have to, as we can just use our angelic slumber potions and the restoration pot inside the Mind Flayer colony to restore our spell slots. Alright, that's all of the preparations for now, so it's time to enter the Shadowfell. Inside the Shadowfell we are going to free Aelin, as she is incredibly useful for us in our final showdown against Myrkul. Okay, one last thing before we start our charge against Moonrise Towers. We will enter the Sharran Sanctuary at the center of Whiterun Town. Inside we interact with the 3 Shar statues there, where we have to pass a saving throw at each statue to then get one of her blessings. If we pass all of them, we then get 3 different blessings, increasing our intelligence, wisdom and charisma by 5. By passing all 3 saving throws, you will also get access to another secret room with an altar inside. At the altar you can do a blood sacrifice, which will give you some potions and scrolls as a reward. Nothing too crazy, but free stuff is always nice. Just don't steal the dagger, or you will trigger a fight against 3 Dark Justiciars, and they're pretty strong, so it's best to avoid this. Now, for the shards against Moonrise Towers, we want to switch out Firewall for Ice Storm. I'm gonna explain in a second why. Now, as you might have noticed, all of a sudden we have 2 additional spell slots. These 2 spell slots come for our increased intelligence to the Dark Lady's erudition condition we just got. For those who don't know, the amount of spell slots you have is defined by your wizard level and your intelligence modifier. Just one little side note, this is also something you actually can abuse, because the game won't remove any of your prepared spells, even if you don't have enough spell slots to sustain them. I don't know if this got patched in patch 8 though. Didn't saw anything related to it in the patch notes, but this doesn't necessarily have to mean anything. I don't know. Maybe anyone knows if you can still abuse this or not. Anyway, for the Storm of Moonrise Towers, you want to fly up to these planks, because in this position you usually won't get attacked and you're pretty much safe from any AoE attacks. Once you're up here, you want to push down the Acolyte towards Zaith'isk. By doing this, we are now able to hit all of the defenders with Ice Storm, which is also one of the reasons why we wanted Ice Storm for this fight, as this is the only AoE attack with a big enough radius to hit them all. The other one is that it creates an ice surface, which can cause them to slip and lose their turn. Now, one of the Illithid Powers we took earlier is also very important for this chain of actions. Because of our display special feature, the Acolyte we push down takes some extra psychic damage. And only through this extra damage, we have a more or less guaranteed kill on him through our Ice Storm. This is important as it will trigger our Blood Elixir and grant us our 3rd action point for this turn. Having 2 action points left, we can fly down again to get Zaith'isk into our shriek range. and then, well, kill her using a level 4 and 2 magic missiles. Just be careful you don't fly on top of your own ice surface and potentially use your turn. For the rest of the fight, we then just keep our high ground and shoot down the defenders one by one using magic missiles while they are occupied fighting the Hyenas.
There's an Illithid parasite in that corpse. You should take a look.
Now, for the fight against Ketheric, make sure you have some water in your inventory so you can get him wet during the combat, which will help us to take him down quickly. Alright. Unlike in most boss fights, we actually won't immediately go for the boss. Instead, we want to focus our attacks on the Necromancer in front of Aylin. Now, there are multiple reasons why we want to do this. First of all, she has the Fireball spell, which would force us to use counter spell against her, as this is the only way how we can avoid taking damage from this spell. Secondly, she has the Incubate Death ability, which she will use every turn since this is a bonus action. Plus, these Skeletar in Volkurs tend to be buggy and not join combat, which is very bad for a no-hit one, since they explode. And last but not least, if she's still alive, Aylin tends to go for her instead of Ketheric. And we of course don't want that. We want her to focus all of her attacks on Ketheric, which we can achieve by killing the Necromancer. After we killed the Necromancer, we throw a speed potion on Aylin to increase her AC and give her a second action point. Now, all that's left to do for our first turn is to make use of our bonus action, and here we want to cast Stage Fright on Ketheric. It doesn't have a very high chance to hit, however we can use it without having to get closer to Ketheric, which is important so we still have enough movement speed left to get out of his range. Plus, if we succeed, this is a very big gain for us. This is because Aylin and Ketheric will very likely engage each other, and since Aylin already has a pretty decent AC, having disadvantage on top of that, Ketheric will have a very hard time hitting her and even take some damage from missing his attacks. Also, Aylin will stay alive for longer, which of course is also very good for us. Unfortunately though I missed, and everything I just told you was purely theoretical. You're welcome. Anyways, Aylin decided not to go for Ketheric and instead push a Necromite off the tower. Bit rude, but after that she goes for Ketheric as we wanted. Alright, when we are fighting Ketheric, we have to consider that he gets the Magical Plate passive feature from his armor, which makes our main source of damage, magic missiles, pretty much useless against him. This is where our water comes into play now, as we can use it to make him wet, which gives him lightning and cold vulnerability. Okay, I was a bit torn on what I wanted to do next, as I wanted to take out Ketheric right here and now, but my odds as of now are not the best. Our odds of hitting him are 75%, which in itself is good enough, but then I also need a high enough damage roll, if we don't use our Luck of Far Realms reaction, to turn our attack into a critical hit. And that's the issue. I don't want to do that, because once we use that reaction, it's gone, since both the Angelic Slumber Potions and the Restoration Pot don't refresh this ability. And keeping this ability for our fight against Myrkul will be a lot more valuable for us than using it here. The good thing is we don't have to use it now, as we can just use Glyph of Warding to deal damage to Ketheric and kill the Necromites next to him for our blood elixir. In theory at least, because I noticed that the Legions of Bones sometimes prevent your blood elixir from triggering, which I believe to be a bug. At least I don't see any reason why this should be intentional. Either way, that was the reason why I was a bit reluctant to use an AoE attack here. But it's technically still the better play, so I went for it. Yeah, here we are, and the Bloodlust Elixir didn't trigger. Well, not much left to do for us except to fly back into our corner, so Ketheric won't target us with his legendary ability. Now, the funny part here is that I actually made a mistake. Attacking Ketheric with the Chromatic Orb right away would have been the actual best move. And this is because Aiden simply gets to attack him again. I don't know how I didn't saw that, but clearly I didn't, and the fight could have already been over if I just played better. Anyway, on our next turn we then fly back to Ketheric and finally fire our chromatic orb at him. At this point, since Ketheric already lost half of his HP, we don't even need to use a level 4 upcast anymore, and can save the spell slot for later to cast Ice Storm against the remaining Necromites. With Ketheric retreating, we just have to clear up the remaining Necromites, which is easily taken care of through some AoE attacks. Alright, we got past Ketheric fairly easy, even though I made a significant misplay. But there is another issue that just revealed itself. I didn't level up. Yeah, I was under the assumption that beating Ketheric would give me enough XP to reach level 9. But that wasn't the case. In fact, I'm still over 2000 XP short, which is quite a lot. In case you wonder why it's important that I reach level 9 before I enter the Mindflayer colony, it's because by reaching level 9 I unlock the next trading stage, which allows me to buy scrolls from level 6 spells. And unfortunately, we need them if we want to beat Myrkul without taking any hits. Anyway, there are still a lot of roaming enemies left that I haven't killed yet, so I went on a killing tour. But even that wasn't enough. And now I have no choice left but to do Harsin's quest, even though I really didn't want to, as even the slightest mistake in this fight would already mean certain death for us. Okay, now that I have set the scene, let's get to it. Before we talk to Harsin, we throw a speed potion in front of us so we can collect it later, and by using a speed potion for haste, we also can use our concentration slot for a different spell, which is going to be Firewall. Now, once you talk to Harsin, you want to immediately pause the game so you have enough time to correctly set up your firewall. When we set up our firewall, we want it to reach all the way back into the water, so it hits the shadows that are going to spawn there. The shadows are also the reason why this fight is so dangerous for us, since they have the Strength Drain ability, which is a saving throw attack that we can't counter and will always deal damage to us, even if we succeed our saving throw. Now, once the combat started, we collect our speed potion and then throw a bomb at the shadows. Using bombs is the best way for us to deal with the shadows, as this is the only AoE attack that they are not resistant to. And through our Careless Glowing, we even deal some radiant damage with our bombs, which actually even makes them somewhat vulnerable to this attack. This means, in combination with our P-Cross Firewall, one bomb usually will be enough to immediately kill all of the shadows. This of course doesn't include the wave, but we can just cast magic missiles to finish him off as well. Now, this doesn't mean we are out of danger yet, as there will be a second wave of shadows in this fight, and we of course have to deal with them as well. But for now we can shift our focus to the shadow cursed creatures and try to get as many kills as possible before the portal falls. There is no reason for us to focus a certain type of shadow cursed creature, since unlike the shadows, they are just going to ignore us anyway and try to go after the portal. Which is something we don't care about, as we are just here to get enough XP to get to level 9. Poor Harsin. He was doomed the moment he entered the portal. Anyway, once the second wave of shadow spawns, we do the same thing we did before. Throw a bomb at them and then finish off the wave using magic missiles. Once we dealt with them, a very important part of our strategy is to not refill our speed potion. And you know why? Yeah, I got nothing. I guess that's what happens once you get used to using the haste spell. Oh well, luckily this isn't as bad as it seems, since the shadow cursed creatures are just going to attack the portal and not us. But still, we lost a lot of XP by losing our turns here. Or did we? Yeah, you just get all of the XP anyway, even if you fail. This would have made this entire fight so much easier if I just knew this beforehand. But oh well, at least we finally reached level 9 and are still in the game. At level 9 we take the Cone of Cold and Conjure Elemental. Cone of Cold is kinda whatever, I just took it because it's a decent AoE spell, but if you want to use a different spell, we can just ditch that one. Conjure Elemental, however, is a spell we want for our fight against Myrkul, as this summon can deal some decent damage against him, if he hits that is. Technically, you could also just buy a scroll to get this summon, but I'm kinda short on money and I needed to buy a bunch of different scrolls. Alright, the scrolls we want to buy for our fight against Myrkul are Chain of Lightning, Disintegrate and Globe of Invulnerability. Additionally, we also want to get some water so we can make Myrkul weak against lightning damage. Obviously, we won't be able to get all of this in one single trade, so we're going to have to reset our trainers. Now, we of course can't long rest to reset our trainers, as this would get rid of all our temporary buffs we saved for this final moment. So, how are we going to reset our trainers? Well, we simply reset our own character and then level her up again. Because every time one of your characters takes a level up, the traders will reset their inventory. The only issue with that, of course, is that you can't take advantage of each level up, since we need at least one level 9 character to unlock the good shit that we want to buy. This makes this a bit tedious, since we need a lot of resets to get everything we want, but since you also can just steal back the money from withers, you can do this an infinite number of times. Now, to be completely honest with you, that's not what I did. I did this once to showcase that technically you could do this as a solo character, however I don't have the patience to fully level up my character over and over again. So I just grabbed one of my companions from camp and leveled them up to speed up the trading progress. I know, the haters were right all along, I'm a dirty cheater. Anyways, at the end of our little trading journey, we end up with 1 lightning chain, 1 invulnerability globe and 4 disintegrate scrolls. And with that we finished our final preparations and it's time to enter the Mind Flayer colony. Inside the Mind Flayer colony we solved the brain mapping puzzle to get the waking mind, which we then can insert in the Mind Archive interface to get the Githaway Mind Parry buff. While we are there, we also grab the Resonance Stone, which inflicts ourselves and our enemies with the Death in Bliss condition. This condition, by the way, is going to be completely busted in combination with the Mind Blast Illithid Power, which we are going to get at the start of Act 3, so make sure you get it. And last but not least, we are of course going to free Us, who is actually playing an important role in our fight against Myrkul, as he is the perfect one to trigger a surprise attack in our fight against him, due to his range attack, which allows us to preserve our action points for the actual fight. Okay, once we got everything we need, we then can use the restoration device to restore all our spell slots. Just remember, in honor mode you can only use this device once, so you should only use it once you are ready to face Myrkul. Now, before we take the elevator down to Myrkul, we want to summon all of our summons that we want to use in this fight, which are Scratch, us, the Aesir, and the Air Elemental. After we summoned everyone, we then use our recovery charges to restore our level 5 spell slot. By using the Aesir as a summon, this of course means that we miss one of our level 4 spell slots, but that's completely fine. Having 2 level 4 spell slots will be more than enough.
My tadpole's squirming like it's excited. I'm scared.
Alright, for our fight against Myrkul, we have to prepare ourselves properly, otherwise this will end in a disaster. First of all, we throw a speed potion in front of the platform so we can collect it later. Just don't throw it directly in front of the flash ladder, so you and your summons can get up the platform without collecting it. Then we want to group up all our summons and throw an invisibility potion at them, which allows us to get them all in position without triggering the combat. For the positions we want the elementals to the left of Ketheric, us to the right so he can reach the Mind Flayer for the surprise attack, and Scratch of course next to Aiden. Once you send your summons to their positions, you also want to immediately start doing your own debuffs, otherwise you might risk having your summons invisibility run out before you are ready. When you approach Ketheric, you also don't have to be scared to hit him with your Shriek radius, because unlike in other encounters, this won't trigger the combat here. I'm not 100% sure why. I believe it's because of the forced cutscene before the fight, but that's just an assumption on my part. Anyway, once we are next to Ketheric, we want to pause the game so we have time for any fine-tuning in our positioning, which mostly includes getting Scratch to climb up to Aelan, and for us to get the correct field of view to hit the Mind Flayer for the surprise attack. And then, once you're ready, it's time to trigger the fight. The moment you trigger the fight, you, or rather any actual character, meaning your player character and any companions, will be forced out of their invisibility from the cutscene to join the scripted conversation with Ketheric. This, however, will not include your summons, as they are not part of the scripted conversation, so they keep their invisibility. But this also means you have to skip through the conversation, as only the characters part of this conversation will have their time paused for them and cause them not to lose their conditions. For anyone who's not part of this conversation, your summons, their time will continue as normal, causing them to lose their conditions while you are in this conversation. So we have to skip through the cutscene, immediately switch to Scratch to free Aelan, and then immediately switch to our elementals to pause the game for them once more, which then allows us to have them join the combat the moment we want to. Now, when you do this, you have to consider that there's a cooldown on how often you can pause the game. This means you can't go to Scratch, pause the game, free Aelan, and then switch to your elementals to pause the game again, as the cooldown will prevent you from doing so. Meaning you have to do this all in one go. But this is not nearly as stressful as it looks like, as long as you don't panic and misclick over and over again, you should have more than enough time to pull this off. Alright, before we do anything else, we use our flying potion to pick up our speed potion for the additional action point. Then we place the water bottle next to Ketheric to make him wet. This is also the moment where our elementals come into play, as we can use them to destroy the water bottle and get him wet, so we don't have to use our own action point to do so and save it for an actual attack. Now, before we attack Ketheric, we will replace our Battle Mage's elixir with a blood elixir, so we get an extra action point once we killed him. Now, you can just do this because you won't actually lose your Arcane Acuity stacks by replacing the elixir of Battle Mage's power. All you lose is the effect of refilling them back to 3 each turn, which doesn't matter to us at the moment, as we still have 2 stacks, and it's more important that we get the extra action point for killing him, so we can set up our globe. Now, to kill Ketheric, we just use 2 Disintegrate Scrolls, as they have the highest hit chance and are guaranteed to kill him after 2 hits. Now, the reason why it's so important that we kill Ketheric on our first turn is because technically Myrkul and Ketheric are the same person, which means that Myrkul will have all the conditions Ketheric had once he spawns, and this includes the surprise condition. Alright, once Myrkul spawned, don't attack him. There is a misconception among a lot of players that bosses can't use their legendary ability when they are surprised, but this is just straight up wrong, as they can and will use their legendary ability against you even if they are surprised. Okay, now we come to the somewhat sad part of this no-hit one, as the only way for us to avoid taking damage from Myrkul's legendary ability is to cast Globe of Invulnerability, or we bait his legendary ability with our summons, but that is just straight up cheating. Now, some of you might wonder, can't we just one-shot him to avoid having to use the Globe? Well, no. While it is true that back in the day it was technically possible to one-shot Myrkul without the use of Battlemancy, these days are long gone. Since Honor Mode was introduced to the game, Myrkul has seen multiple buffs, which included increasing his HP to 390 and also now keeps his magical plate condition from Ketheric, which makes it so that damage stacking against him is not nearly as effective as it used to be anyway. So yeah, unfortunately there is not much we can do here if we want to avoid taking a hit from his reaction. This, however, doesn't mean there is zero danger for us in this fight. Sure, at the moment we can't take any damage, but he still can knock us back with his cleave attack, which would break our concentration, and if we fall off the platform, we also will take fall damage, ending our run. Anyway, on our next turn, we start by hitting Myrkul with our Chain of Lightning Scroll, which can chain towards the Necromites or the Mind Flayer, giving us a potential kill to trigger our Blood Elixir. Now, after that attack, I should have replaced my Blood Elixir with the Elixir of Battle Mage's power again, to increase my hit chance against Myrkul. I didn't do that, so I only have a 75% chance to hit him, with the arguably most important attack of the fight. since our next attack will be the level 5 Chromatic Orb that we want to turn into a critical hit for some massive damage. Never punished. Now, after that attack, I considered trying to kill the Mind Flayer, because I was a bit scared of his Mind Blast attack. This fear, however, was completely unjustified, as the Mind Flayer will always try to dominate Alien before doing anything else. He only, however, will try this for 2 turns, because the Mind Flayer domination is a level 4 spell, and after 2 tries he will be out of level 4 spell slots. So that is something we have to pay attention to. I decided not to attack Myrkul with one of my Disintegrate Skulls, but instead use a level 4 Lightning Bolt, as he is still vulnerable to lightning damage. And this is an AoE attack that can't miss. After that attack, I also realized my mistake of not drinking another Battle Mage elixir, so I didn't know. Bit late, but at least we will have it for our next and hopefully last turn, as our globe is going to run out.
One life to my life.
Here you also can see the Mind Flayer trying to dominate Aelin, which we have to counterspell, so she doesn't screw us over if he hits. Also, don't forget to use a level 4 counterspell, since the Mind Flayer domination is a level 4 spell, otherwise your counterspell might fail. Alright, next and hopefully final turn, the game plan is quite simple. We are just going to attack him with our 2 last remaining Disintegrate Scrolls, as they have the highest potential damage, and unless we have some absolute abysmal damage rolls, this should kill him. Also, just look at the difference of our hit chance now that we drank the Battle Mage elixir. 95 to 75. Pretty significant. So, best make sure you don't repeat my mistake in your own games. This definitely could have gone very different if the Chromatic Orb didn't hit. But, as always, never punished.